Great to be here. My name is Camilla Sandberg. I'm CEO for Miris, and I'll tell a little bit about the company, and I'll also dive a little bit into our Q3 numbers. So, starting off with the company, Miris is a small medtech company based in Uppsala. The company was established in 2001 and has been public since 2006. We had our first developed product was a dairy milk analyzer, basically a small instrument to analyze the nutritional content in dairy milk. A few years later, there was a Professor Berger from the hospital here in Lund that requested a similar instrument for analysis of breast milk. He was working on nutrition for preterm babies and needed a way to figure out the nutritional content in human milk, basically. So in 2006, we launched the human milk analyzer as well. In 2017, the company did quite a big strategical change where we changed 100% into the clinical application of the human milk analysis for target fortification for preterm babies. Per today, the company, we're 8 employees, divided by a sales department, production. We have quality assurance and regulatory affairs, and we also have a small team of consultants running development. Per today, we're working on a global scale. We have about 450 instruments installed, divided by 53 countries. I would say that our 2 biggest markets are Europe and US per today. The instrument is the only human milk analyzer which is available as a medical device, and it's registered as a medical device in both Europe by FDA in the US and also in Japan. So basically that means we have no competition at this point. So why do you need to analyze human milk? This is known that human milk is the best nutrition for newborn babies, preterm or normal born babies. At the same time, we also know that the nutritional content in human milk is varying quite a lot. And that becomes a problem for preterm babies because their need for nutrition is extremely high. As you can imagine, when you're born prematurely, your development is not done, and you still need to develop organs and the brain and the growth and everything. So if you just give a normal human milk to a preterm baby, the risk of over or undernutrition is really high. And this can have both short and long-term clinical consequences for the baby. So our solution to this is basically that you analyze the milk, and by analyzing it with the human milk analyzer, you will get the concentration of protein, fat, and carbohydrates in a minute. And then based on that, you can actually calculate how much nutrition you need to add to the milk, so-called targeted fortification. And then you give that milk to the baby. And the result of this is that the baby will grow at the right speed, so not too fast and not too slow. And this will then minimize the chances for clinical consequences further down the road for the baby. This is kind of a schematic overview of the whole process, and this is standard of care here in Sweden. So you take a milk sample, you analyze it, you calculate what you need to fortify, and then you follow the baby and evaluate the growth of the baby. Standard of care in Sweden, and it's Miris' goal to basically educate the rest of the world that they need to implement this in neonatal intensive care units. So our two biggest markets are neonatal intensive care units and also so-called milk banks. Our product portfolio looks like this. It's been optimized over the last few years. We have the instrument in front. Oops, no, sorry. Here we go. Can I do it? Here is the instrument itself. We also have two sample prep instruments. It's for heating the samples going into the instrument, and it's also an ultrasonic processor to homogenize the milk before it goes into the instrument. We have a few consumables. Two of them are quality controls and then also a cleaning solution. And we also sell different types of service agreements. And I think I'll go into the Q3 report and some stats from that now. I'm very happy to be able to report yet another great quarter. We have had a good growth, sales growth so far this year. And at the same time, we are the profit is getting better as well. Mention some stats from the US, since this is kind of our biggest or fastest growing market right now. We have 79 instruments installed in the US by now in 29 states. 31% of the milk banks in the US are using our instrument, and 7% of all the high-level NICUs have started using it. So it's still a good potential for growth in the US. Wanted to also mention the total reoccurring revenues and the growth we have here, because this is important with having reoccurring income growing steadily as part of the net sales. And we have a good gross margin as well, as you can see. Digging into the reoccurring revenues a little bit, so that's both consumables, service, and freight. Looking only on the consumables for the HMA, you can see the growth we've had since 2017. Before 2017, the consumables was about 5 to 7% of the total net sales. And this is something that we worked quite hard to optimize margins, even add consumables to the portfolio. But obviously, the biggest reason for its increase is the number of instruments installed in the market. And the fact that the instruments are actually used also. What we do see also is that the average number of analysis is actually increasing quite a bit as the market is starting to understand the need for this process. And again, this increases our reoccurring income, which is giving us both stability in net sales and stability in our prognosis. Wanted to just talk a little bit about the margin change as well. We have, as you can see here, there is a stable trend when it comes to our gross margin, and we have a positive trend when it comes to operating margin. The ups and downs around here, it's very much because of the COVID situation with unstable market and unstable sales, and also cutting back on costs and so on. But from a year back, we can see we have had a really good trend. And this is something that we are obviously looking to increase even more, but we're getting very close to zero and even moving forward. So that's great. I wanted to also just touch on the cash flow situation. So the sales for Q3, 5.2 million, it's 133% up from the same period last year. We have so far this year a growth of 50% versus last year. This gives us, as you can see, also accounts receivable has grown quite a bit, and our profit loss is decreasing. Again, increasing stability and showing that we're really on our way to be self-financed. Talking a little bit about our liquidity in the end. Obviously, it's easy to look at the cash. By the end of Q3, we had 5.1 million. We also have a check credit of 5 million. But again, it's important to also incorporate the analysis around the increased accounts receivable and the positive trend in operating margin. We have also now started to, or this year, really started to control our development cost because of the focus we have on being able to be self-financed. So we're controlling that. And that means that the existing product we are developing is, we're kind of slowing down the development a little bit to be able to cover our own cost. And with the assumed sales the rest of this year and also next year, we're not seeing any need for any financing, at least for the next 12 months. So just to summarize, the focus for us now is very much to become self-financed through continued sales growth and having an increased working capital. And our financing strategy is basically that we have no need for finance right now, and any finance need we have for development project will be sourced through other sources than a rights issue. So.
Thank you for the presentation. So let's see if there are any questions from the audience. Over there.
Hi, thanks so much for that. And forgive me, because you may have mentioned this, but perhaps not in detail. Do you have a correlation between targeted fortification and some of the complications like NEC and or length of stay in NICU in terms of how these data can be utilized on a broader basis beyond nutrition? And if so, or if they're not historically present, is there a chance to study that prospectively, or is it really not relevant?
Well, I think that's relevant. I think the data on the length of the stay, it's a bit hard because there are so many other issues also. But what we are seeing is that the babies that get the targeted fortification, they need less time. At least we've seen that in Sweden. There are no, the thing here in Sweden when they started with targeted fortification was that they saw it worked. So they implemented it without doing any clinical trials on it. But with the US market now coming into play, there are several clinical trials on the way. And the data we've seen so far is that the babies are growing at their natural pace, and that means that some of the other clinical issues they have will diminish or be smaller. And there are several publications on that. Nutritional imbalance as well as immaturity
Hi, Maria. I'm the sales director of Miris. So there is a study from a professor that was in Canada at McMaster when he did a study. He's now in Nuremberg. So what they saw was they saw a reduction in neck for the babies that received target fortification, but they didn't reach significance because there were too few babies in that study. What they saw was a trend towards a lower neck and trend towards lower food intolerance. And they think they speculate that this is because if you're getting more stable feed, your gut system will mature in a more or better way. But the clinical implications otherwise is lower BPD, lower ROP, for instance, and then of course a more stable growth. So which is or brain growth. So they're measuring head circumference, so how much your head is growing, and also for white matter, they have seen an improvement if you're targeting your fortification.
So you mentioned that you are developing the next version of analysis instrument. When do you expect this to be ready?
Well, the plan was originally around 2025. I think it's going to be prolonged a little bit longer because we've, as I mentioned here, we have to take a little bit of a step back in the pace of it because it's expensive to develop that product. So we're kind of taking bits and pieces now, yeah, it's going to probably add a couple of years extra. I would assume, yeah.
I see. And as you also mentioned, you had a really big sales growth this last quarter. Could you explain a bit what's driving that growth?
So I think this is something that we've seen throughout this year and even starting end of last year as well, that after we came back to the market, after we could start traveling again, is that even if we have not been able to travel and the hospitals have been closing down during COVID, as we come back into it, we have been continuing doing our marketing, our education of our market. And in general, the whole concept of nutrition for preterm babies is becoming quite a big thing. So now when we're out at conferences, for example, everybody knows who we are. It's not anymore that we have to explain why we're there and what we're doing. And also the fact that we had a good, in the US, for example, a bit of a footprint in the US even before COVID meant that papers are starting to come out. People in the community are starting to discuss this at conferences, and it's becoming a broader knowledge that nutrition is important. And not only in the US, it's the same in Europe, and it's the same in Asia as well. So I think in neonatal intensive care units, they've solved the issues how to help for heart and lungs and all the big things. And now more and more people are understanding the need to actually get the nutrition for the babies right as well. New hospitals in the US, they're all building their milk rooms, for example, and so on. And that's where we come in.
I see. And you received the ISO certificate also this year.
Yes.
What difference does that make?
So first and foremost, it means that we have the quality system that we need to have in place, but it also gives us long-term a possibility of moving into new markets. So, for example, we've been in China for many years, but that's not on a clinical level. That's for other types of applications. But it will be possible for us to move into the clinical market in China long term, for example. And there are also other markets where you need to have ISO before you can actually apply for being able to sell in that country. So that's great.
I see. Let's take a final question from the audience.
Hi, I'm Peter Wolpert at Industrifonden. Thanks for a nice presentation. I'm interested to learn a little bit more about the commercial potential. You have a pretty unique market position, but the question is, what type of commercial potential do you see in the human analysis market? And also the second question would be, to really get large adoption in the US, what do you need there? Would you need guidelines adoption, or what's the route there?
Yeah. So I'll take the last question first. So obviously guidelines is something that that will make it easier for us because then everybody will have to do it. But we're moving in that direction. It's becoming more and more hospital. It's standard that you have to do targeted fortification for the tiniest babies. So that's going to help us. But we also see that because of the publications starting to come up, that's really good evidence as well for us. And we can, when you reach a certain point also, everybody else will follow, especially in the US where you have the private sector hospitals. So I think, again, the guidelines, we see that it's moving in that direction, but that's going to be more long term, obviously. It is. The first question was
the commercial potential. Will this be a unicorn? Will it be $100 million company?
Well, we're the only company doing this. So our estimates for the total markets moving forward with a little bit of a different business strategy than we have today, it's about 11 to 12 billion dollars worldwide. So it's not a huge, but it's pretty big when you're the only one in the world doing it. It's still a niche market, so it's. I think that it's going to be. I think it's going to take time before anybody else is going to come in and take it away from us only, or try to kind of move into this market as well. You have dairy milk analysis companies. They don't know the clinical market, and it will be too costly for them to go into this market. They would have to start all over. Then you have more the nutrition companies, maybe, but we have seen nothing of like that they are moving into this either. So we still think it's for us as one company. It's a big opportunity. Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.